Hello.
Hey there, friendly people. Hi, Amber.
Hi, Jenny.
How are you doing
For
today?
everybody watching, I'm doing
Hi, pretty
good.
people.
This is TransParents. This is episode 3. My name is Amber. My pronouns are she, her.
My name is Jenny. My pronouns are also she, her. And we are proud parents of people who happen to be trans.
Yep, trans sons. Woohoo! Both of
We
us.
make the world a little
Um,
better for them and
yep,
even for you. We want to make the world better for everybody. So thanks for being here.
we appreciate it very much
Please
so.
feel free to drop a comment. Let us know you're here. Say hello. Tell us where you're coming in from. Keep in mind, we can't really comment back like typed, but
Right.
we can acknowledge you, say hi. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, drop them. No hate. This is a safe space. This is a loving, affirming space. But, we're okay with questions that are or comments that are made in earnest sincerity and
Suki.
concern. What's up? Is that Yusuke?
We
What
have
a
our
beautiful name.
yes, that is our first one of the evening. And I will say to everyone, last week, for whatever reason, we only got like half the comments, and I'm not sure why.
They
But on
weren't showing up?
LinkedIn, yeah,
Okay.
they weren't showing up. Like I think we had like when I went back after the show, I had like 4 or 5 people that we were seeing, and we had at least 5 other people commenting that we never saw any of theirs. So I'm not exactly sure why that happened last week, and hopefully it will be better this week. But if we don't show your comment, it may be because or we don't answer it. It may be because we haven't seen it yet. I did go back after the show and answered anybody that had questions in there, and I will do that again. But
Give
just
us
in
a little
case you
bit of
ask
grace.
something.
We're working with
Right.
technology and it is imperfect, just like us.
Yes, and LinkedIn the lives have had some issues
Yeah.
for a couple of months now. So the comments, especially like the comment section jumping or people not showing up in comments until after the event. I even had that problem in September and several events. So hopefully they'll get the hiccups smoothed out. But just so everybody's aware,
Are we
didn't
on
exclude
YouTube
any.
yet? We're not YouTube
Yes.
yet, are we?
Yeah, we are.
Are we on
Yeah,
YouTube
we've been
right
on
now?
YouTube. Yeah.
How
We've
exciting.
been, okay, so the first episode we uploaded and downloaded. And then after that, since the second episode last week, we aired at the same time. And this week we're on there at the same time. Well, then here goes a test comment. Cooper, it worked. It worked. I can't remember if Cooper, I feel like Cooper's were showing up last week. It was Ken Dunner. I know was one that wasn't showing up.
Okay.
Michael showed up. Lydia, I think, showed up. But we had a few people last week who were showing up in the comments that afterwards I was like, oh, they were here and I didn't know it. In fact,
Yeah.
I want to say Andy was here last week and he didn't show up in the comments and he had left several. So it was the same thing. It's just
want to acknowledge you. We want to interact with you. Again, we're dealing with technology. Just
right.
hang tight with us. We're doing our best.
We'll get there. It'll work itself out eventually, right? Should. And tonight we kind of wanted to touch on the differences between biological sex and gender, some of the different studies that have come out in recent years about the research that's being done within the trans community that supports their gender affirming care, that supports this idea that there is something more to gender identity than our biological sex, that they are two very different things. And a lot of times people want to confuse them and say they're the same thing and they aren't. And so we just kind of wanted to share a bit of our insights with it. Remember, we're not medical professionals. I'm a healthcare advocate, but I am not a doctor. I am not a psychiatrist. And we're just trying to drop information out here to help you be more aware, help you understand a bit better where we're coming from and where our kids are coming from. But that's kind of our goal here. And we have a Igor Vorapay coming up, but he also says to subscribe to his YouTube channel. So I'm not exactly sure that is just maybe cross advertisement, possibly.
Could be. If you're joining us from YouTube, please like, subscribe, share, do all the things. That
yes, definitely. Definitely.
I don't really.
We haven't gotten any comments. We haven't gotten any comments there, which I'm kind of.
Oh, okay. So I thought that one was coming from YouTube, but that makes sense. I see the little
No.
by his name. Okay, well, we're gonna figure this out anyway. Like, subscribe, share, join us again. I don't have anything else.
Support being people. Let's see, what did Cooper say? And supports people being in sports teams consistent with their gender identity. Yep, Yes, that again, that goes back to that proof that we're talking about. We're actually going to do one, not tonight, but we are going to do one specifically. I spoke with someone, Martin Stark, actually came into one of my shows on Mama Bear recently, and he is from, and I hate to say this, it's either New Zealand or Australia, but he worked within helping to get the requirements for wrestling for trans individuals to be able to compete. And so we were kind of talking about one of the subjects that we could go further into is just talking about all the different logistics that different sports entities have come up with for these requirements that are based on science so that these people can play, so that other people, when they play with them or compete against them, they don't feel like they have some kind of leverage in the competition field. And that's one of those misstated assumptions that's made quite often is
I'm really looking forward to that one because I really would like for my parents to see that one. So I know that we are both going to come to, I've got a couple things to come to the table with on that subject already, as far as some athletes in the past historically. I don't want to spoil anything because it's going to be really cool, but bringing some of that science to the table, bringing some of because it's not what people think it is. It really just isn't.
It's not. It really isn't. And so I'm going to flip the screen here and go, so biological sex is based on physical characteristics such as your chromosomes, your reproductive organs, and your hormones. Gender is based on social and cultural expectations, so your roles, behaviors, and actions. So while biological sex is usually assigned at birth, gender is something that is learned and expressed over time. Now, they honestly used to say that this was developed by the age of 6. I am seeing some things now saying as far as up to 12 before they really kind of come into this expression. If you go back into Freud, I'd say that honestly, he probably would say you figured this out by the age of 5. So again, I will say, I don't know what your experience with that is. I will say that by 5, my son was definitely expressing masculine qualities, never wanted anything feminine, anything to do with feminine, didn't want to dress feminine, didn't play, his play wasn't nurturing. So like with dolls, with Barbies, with any of those things, it was, let me play with cars. I want to play with G.I. Joes. I want to play with Nerf guns. I want to play with animals. His stuffies. His stuffies were a big thing for him. It was never with like dolls and stuff. And so when he did come out as an adult,
hi, Mariah.
I will say, looking back, it was like, no, I always knew that. I just always knew that. Yes, some people don't, but Cooper, I would say the people that don't transition until middle age, those are people that, quite frankly, as children were probably shunned back into the closet.
Absolutely.
And wanted to conform and wanted to make other people happy. And so they get married and they try to live that life. They do. They try and live this life to make everybody else happy. And they get to a point where they're like, I can't do this anymore. I've hidden who I am. Yeah. And I feel really bad for those people, honestly, Cooper. It's not easy. And I also say that Mariah is here from Florida. Her and Byron have been supporters of us and came last week. Oh, there's Byron, actually, right when I said that. He popped up. So
my experience was, my son seemed if I look back on it now, I would almost say that my son seemed more like maybe non-binary or on the fence. There were times whenever he was he dressed girly because I dressed him girly and he went with that.
Right.
But he did enjoy having long hair for a while, but his play was pretty much the same. He wasn't ever into mothering, nurturing, what we would consider feminine roles.
Right. Right.
But it also wasn't trucks and cars and guns. It was art. It was reading. He always was reading books, always doing art. Enjoyed
that was mine too.
And doing a lot of physical activity. But I mean, I think that's genderless. All kids.
That's kids. That's kids. But I will say that mine went very much into the art realm as well. Very art, very reading, an intellectual, a thinker, not a feeler. Yeah. Which that does not determine our gender whatsoever. But
Right.
I
Right.
remember, and mine even came out as asexual in high school. I'm asexual. I think I'm agender. I don't really know. I don't really care. I'm not interested.
Yeah.
That at the time, that was where he was at. But no, from my son, from the time he kind of became aware, was like, I don't want to wear that.
Right.
Like I pull out the dresses. Like my grandmother would get him a dress for Christmas every year, and he'd be like, I don't want to wear that.
Yeah.
Do I have to wear that? I don't want to wear that to Christmas
Yeah, I
dinner. Like,
wasn't real big
no.
into making my kids wear dresses anyway because I always hated stuff like that. Now my daughter was much more inclined to and always asked for skirts, twirly skirts, and I kind of let them pick out their clothes. And my
Right? I
son
did too.
leaned more toward pants and t-shirts and hoodies, that kind of
Yep.
stuff. I wouldn't say it
Yep.
was really masculine. It would still be very girly, but it never mattered to me. I always just kind of figured they'll play with what they want to play with. They'll dress the way they want to dress as long as they don't look like, garbage if we're going to something nice. But
Right.
we didn't go do a lot of
Right.
nice things. I mean, we're just living regular life. So I didn't care that much.
I think the only time that I forced my kid to wear a dress, and it wasn't really forcing, but that's what I was getting at. My grandmother worked for Belt Tyler.
Mhm.
So she worked for a clothing department store. And every year for Christmas, she gave, and this was when I was little too, she would give my sister and I like a dress for Christmas. And Christmas Eve, we went to her father's house for a traditional dressed up
Yeah.
Christmas dinner.
Yeah.
And so whatever she gave us every year, we opened on Christmas Eve to wear to this event. And so she did the same thing for my kids. And so my kid would be like, I don't want to wear that. And I'm like, it's just the granddaddies.
It's just this one
Just, just,
time.
just do it for grandma. Make grandma happy because grandma got it for you for this event. Can we just wear it? Just it's only around family. We're not going around real people.
Yeah.
Like friends in public. It's just we're going to granddaddy's house. Can we just wear this? And he did. He worked with me on that. But like anything else, it was not dress. It was never a dress. It was never a skirt. It was always pants.
All those things are part of that gender expectation that we have in society. Yep. We have this gender expectation. We created it. Since the dawn of time, since we first rose from the primordial ooze and developed our primary sex characteristic, breasts, penises, body hair in different places. Since those things have happened, we as a human species went, oh, some people have half the population has this and half the population has this. So these people, we're going to call them women, girls, and these people we're going to call them men, boys. And we could have just as easily called them anything else. We could have made up any words in the whole world.
Right.
I'm sure that, somebody could be like, well, it's from the Latin, this and that. No, I get that, but it still comes down to, we chose these words. And then from there, we started deciding what that meant. I think that probably cisgender women or, even, I think it probably is a more feminine, what we consider feminine trait, to be a little more nurturing, babies, caretakers, because naturally, we can get pregnant. And so I think biologically, it makes sense that we should be more nurturing in that way, because imagine a world in which we weren't, and we just popped babies out of our bodies and went and did other stuff. That wouldn't work out, right? Where our species wouldn't survive. So those gender roles came from somewhere, and it makes sense.
Right.
But when you get past a certain point of evolution, when we're no longer, it's survival, right? Nobody's out hunting and
gathering,
worried that wolves are going to attack in the night, or everybody's kind of on a little more level playing field. That time to kind of break that down, then women who want to go work outside of the home, that used to be a big, like, what? There was a case in, now I can't remember, I think it was in Chicago in the 70s, and a female teacher, a cisgender female teacher, went to court, and she wore pants. And the judge told her, do not come back into this courtroom unless you're wearing a skirt. What? And why? Why? Even as silly as that seems to, now that was in like 1977. This wasn't back in,
I got one for you last week. Before
I was born.
Last week in Kentucky, there is, this is a case on women's reproductive rights, and we won't go into what the case is, but the judge referenced the 31-year-old girl could be taken to court. The 31-year-old girl. That's the kind of thing we're talking about. Right. It's just, I had this discussion with my mother today. She actually wanted to talk about how women dressed. And I was like, we aren't going there. Right. Because she wanted to say that we were responsible. And I was like, we are not responsible for someone else's behavior. If you can't control yourself, that's not our problem. That's that other person's problem.
Imagine me seeing somebody get out of their car and noticing that they didn't do the little bleep bleep where the lights blink and you know that their little locks are set, and going, well, I just have the right to take whatever I want out of their car. They didn't lock it.
No.
Therefore, it's mine. Or if somebody is walking down the street and they're not wearing a helmet and I beat them over the head with a bat. Well, if you didn't want to get beat over the head with a bat, you should have worn more protective covering. No, it's still my responsibility.
Said that boy should not be a judge. And you're right, that boy should not be a judge. I was thinking that when I read the article. I was just like, oh, no, we are not going here. 31-year-old? Seriously? Come on, guys. Come on. And Mariah actually put something up here that was keeping kids, actually all people safe and supported, no matter their age, is essential. It's about respect, helping people own their value and know they are more than enough just the way they are. Thank you for all you're doing, Amber. And that is like, whatever you show up as, it is 100% enough. Absolutely. Even if it doesn't fit somebody else's context of what they expect, you don't owe anybody anything except for yourself. To show up exactly as who you are. And if you're disappointing someone, that is not, you haven't been enough of who you are. That's, they had something wrong with their expectations of you and they need to adjust themselves. And that is something that I think that I'm becoming more aware of, that people have a problem with, is that they want to be able to interject. They want to be able to say, oh, but this is, I don't think that's okay what your kid is doing. Well, that's great for you, but that's not your kid. And it's not your life.
Even if it was your kid, that's still your
not your life.
That is that is a separate, sentient, autonomous human being. My kids aren't mine. They don't belong to me. I don't own them. I don't have agency over them. They're just mine by meaning they're part of, like, they came out of my body. They're part of my lineage. Couldn't come up with a word. That is the only sense in which my kids are mine. Otherwise, right? they are their own people. And I never had children in order to be little extensions of myself, which was probably why it's so easy to really accept my kids and watch their journey, walk along that journey with them and let it be whatever it is, because I only get so much time to influence certain things. I get to influence their behavior, their mannerisms, right? The way they perceive life. I can influence it, but ultimately one day they're going to go out and they're going to take everything they've learned and they're just going to go be. And I'm very different than my parents thought. My parents had a lot of very conservative and religious influence on me, and I did carry that for a long time. Don't get me wrong. But the day came when I was like, this is not who I am. So whatever influence we even think we have on our children, they're still going to go figure out who they are. I'd rather know who they are and help them discover that before that, then, so I get more.
I mean, why would we want them to put on a mask?
Right. I want,
and that's what we're asking them to do. We're asking them to put on a mask and be something that they aren't. I actually saw a case today, and I can't remember the state. I don't know if I think it's Ohio, and it's the case of the parents, their religious beliefs, and that they wanted to send, and that they didn't go into whether the child is non-binary, whether the child is trans. But the deal is that the state has removed the child from the parents because the parents did not support their gender identity, and the parents were trying to send them to conversion camp. And now the parents are trying to sue the state because they believe they should be able to force their religion down their child's throat. It didn't mention the age of the child. And I'm just going to tell you guys, like, I don't care what age you are. I don't think it's okay to force your kid to be something they aren't. I want you to think about any time you were ever forced to be something you aren't. You were forced to be quiet when you wanted to speak. You were forced to speak when you wanted to be silent, and how that made you feel. It doesn't feel good. So why would we ever want to put our children in a spot where they feel less than? And
Right.
I can't, even for religion purposes, like I would have walked, if I had not already walked from my religion, I'm a spiritual person now, but even if I hadn't walked from that then, if my religion required me to make a choice between my child being able to live his authentic life or whether I was going to force something on him, he can have his authentic life.
Yeah.
Because I'm not letting anybody force that down me either.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the way we should look at it. When you're thinking about that, we are here to raise our children, to support them, to nurture them, but it's not for them, like you said, to be copycats of us. It's for them to be themselves, whatever that is. And just like we didn't want our parents telling us, you need to be this way, I'm not going to do that to my kid.
Nobody wants that, right? Imagine the state coming in and saying, well, we're going to take your kids because you're not raising them to be a Republican, a Democrat, a Christian, a Muslim, a Buddhist. Imagine the state. But I think it's interesting because, you know, I do understand the concern there with parents' rights with their kids. And I can understand where somebody might hear about that and go, oh my God, well, the state is now trying to dictate how I raise my children. And what you have to remember is that's based on the fact that we understand now that being trans is not some kind of choice or fad, and that supporting our children in that literally keeps them alive. So really what the state is trying to step in and say, in my opinion, is you don't have the right to subject your child to abuse and shaming. And it would be, you know, it's such an interesting, you know, topic. But ultimately, you know, sending your kids to conversion camp, we already know what those do. If you don't, you know, I don't have the time right now or the bandwidth to educate.
You can go look up the harms. Like, I mean, just go Google it, conversion camp, and there's more negatives than there are positives. Way more negatives.
So much so that
and I think that was the case with this judge. The judge had pretty much said when he went before the court or when they took them away, the reasoning behind why they took the child away from the parents was that every major medical association supported affirming that child.
Right.
And the judge was like, just because your religious text says one thing, I'm looking at what the state does, what the psychologists have said, what the doctors have said, what all these major medical organizations are saying. And I'm sorry, but I'm putting your child in the hands of people who know what they're doing.
Right.
And that's what the judge was saying, that I get that this is your belief system, but facts are your child needs affirming care.
Right.
And we're going to give your child what your child needs for their mental health.
Right.
And when parents want to go up against, I can't imagine trying to take my state to court to fight over my kid, like so I can go throw my kid in a camp. I just like step back a minute.
Yeah.
Why was your kid taken away? Like maybe they need to sit with that for a minute and think about, okay, maybe we were wrong. And that's kind of the situation.
That's not really what happens.
Don't.
All they think is the state is against me. The state is stepping in. They're encroaching upon my deeply held religious beliefs. They are encroaching upon my rights as a parent. And that's just how they see it. I don't think that most of these things, there's people in prison right now who've done horrific things, and they aren't sitting around thinking about what they did the way that we think they're going to and regretting it. They're just in a cage because that's where they need to be. And so at some point, you know, the taking of you know, someone's kids for this really just becomes about, I'm not trying to change your mind. If that happens, good for you. I'm trying to protect a child. And
it comes down to the child. If you're not going to see, if you refuse to see it, that's fine. But we're going to make sure that the kid gets the support system that they need. And it's unfortunate that we have parents that want to buckle down that hard against their kid, because you obviously aren't getting any support, not in that home. And I will say, hello to Leslie, who popped in and said, hello, ladies, for being here. And Cooper had made the comment, 77 was after the civil rights movement and before Reaganomics. So come on, people. And I mean, I don't know.
23, and my daughter cannot decide what she wants to do with her own body. Like it is.
Oh yeah, no.
My little sister at 22 years old can't go get a hysterectomy. Can't find anybody to do it. Now, that's not to say there's nobody who will do it. That's to say she has an insurance provider, right? And often, especially like where I am, all of the hospitals are Saint. We got St. Francis and we got St. John's. I was able to get my hysterectomy. Now, it wasn't a big issue because by the time I got my hysterectomy, I was 39. But going before then, you're looking at going to like a medical college or going to an unaffiliated, not a non-religiously affiliated clinic. And a lot of insurances are covering the Saint hospitals or religious hospitals, and they will not let her have a hysterectomy at her age, even though she's 8 up with endometriosis, because one day a man might come into her life who wants a baby. She's already said she doesn't. They don't even try to say, well, you might change your mind. People have the right though to change their mind.
I had that at 25.
Right to regret a decision.
Right at 25, I needed a hysterectomy, and my insurance company, actually 24, and my insurance company was like, she is too young. We are not doing a hysterectomy. But I'd had 3 kids, and my uterus was just kind of went haywire afterwards for a good year. And my doctor was like, you're not anemic for me to say this is emergent. And so my insurance company kept fighting it. And finally, the insurance company calls me, and they're like, look, the deal is that you're too young. And I said, but I don't need my uterus anymore. And they're like, but wait, what happens if your husband dies and you get remarried and your second husband wants more children? And I was like, okay, stop. First of all, that doesn't change the fact that I birthed 3 children and I don't plan to birth any more children. So regardless of whether I had a second husband. So here again, they were like trying to say it didn't belong to me.
Right. It belongs to a man. I haven't even a hypothetical man that if my husband died, a hypothetical man out there owns the rights to my autonomy. I want to circle back to our topic though, because you and I this letter. So let's talk that biological sex. What exactly determines what we consider biological sex? Well, obviously you've got chromosomes. Do you know your chromosomes, Amber?
Yep.
I don't know my chromosomes. I have no idea what my chromosomes are. Now, because I'm a cisgender woman, it's probably easy to say, oh, well, your chromosomes are this. You don't know that. There have been people well into middle age who find out that they are in fact intersex, that they have an extra Y chromosome, that they have an extra X chromosome. This is not as uncommon as people think, especially when you ignore the law of large numbers. When you go, oh, well, it's only 1%. There are 8 billion people on this planet right now. 1% is not one person. When you think of it as 100 people, one person may seem like, it's one person. When you're talking about 8 billion, it's a lot of people. And intersex people make about 1% of the population. Sometimes it's just a chromosome expression, an extra X and an extra Y. Sometimes it's a hormonal expression. No. That's not true. Sorry about that. The intersex is going to be chromosomal or with your organs. So there are cisgender women who actually may not have a uterus, or may have gonads where their ovaries should be, or may have a combination of different organs that we can't even see. They may not know about it for a very long time. They may not know about it until they don't have a period. They may not know about it. They may go their whole lives having periods, doing all the things. They may not know about it until they decide they want to get pregnant for the first time and are struggling. Those are some, kind of that biological sex indicators. All right. Then you've got obviously your hormones. We know that we typically think of testosterone as a male hormone, and we think of estrogen as a female hormone. And then you've got people like me, I overproduce what are typically known as male hormones. I overproduce androgens. And as a result, I will get things like cystic acne. Anywhere a man, somebody with testosterone grows a beard, I'll get very cystic acne. I get little chin hairs. And there's a lot of women I know who, as they age and their estrogen levels dip, they begin to get little hairs on their face. There are women with polycystic ovarian syndrome who that is one of the side effects, is having, and we are overproducing androgens. And I got on a hormone blocker because I didn't like that. That didn't align with my gender expression. What I know, but that doesn't align with what I think is feminine. I don't think it's feminine to have little man beard. I didn't feel feminine having all that, acne on my face. It didn't make me feel pretty. And feeling pretty is what makes me feel like the woman I am. So I did gender affirming care, which was take hormone blockers that helped my body stay the way I felt like my body should look.
Right.
And all of those are biological sex traits, but they say nothing about how we are raised, how we are conditioned to believe that cleaning the house is the woman's job, that fixing the car is the man's job. We set up those structures as a society, and that gender identity is really where I think our kids, regardless of their chromosomes, hormones, or primary sex organs, that's where that comes into play. They start to feel like, I don't align with like what that is. And it isn't just a rejection of a role. There's plenty of cisgender women who are like, I don't clean the freaking house and I fix cars. There are plenty of cisgender men who don't like football and enjoy, dancing. There are cisgender men who wear women's clothing and they are still cisgender men. Maybe it makes them feel good or pretty. And we decide that, the horror of a man wearing stockings and high heels. But why? Why is that? They're stocking. I mean, don't you like to feel good in what you wear? But it's really a statement about, well, that man isn't being masculine enough. That man isn't living up to a standard that we've set in society that men are supposed to look like this and be like this. Right. Instead of just
or even women, the same way with women. Like if you don't want to be a mom, if you want to go out and be a career person and you don't want to be a mom, oh my gosh, you're not a woman. What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
And I've known and gotten that, seen that play out with different friends in my life about, people, how they felt with that. I had a friend of mine who felt like her mission in life was to have children. And once she had kids, like she was completely fulfilled. And I remember thinking, because you spit out kids, which is what Mother Nature gave us.
Right.
And not to be ugly, but for myself, there was so much more I wanted to do other than just be a mom that I identified with. But for her,
gender.
Right. But for her, that was what she wanted. And that is what we say when everybody identifies differently with their gender. That's what we mean. Some women are more masculine. Some women are equal masculine and feminine. Some women are completely feminine. You can be a range. And what I wanted to mention about the intersex, we worked with someone briefly who did share with us that in medical training, physicians for quite a while in the 80s and 90s, when babies were born that were intersexed and had both organs, they automatically switched them all to female.
Because a vagina was easier to make.
For an infant. And so I just want y'all to think about when you made that comment about middle-aged people. So then you've got people that in their like 30s and 40s going, I'm confused why I don't feel like I align with who I am. And then they discover that their sex organs were changed at infancy and they've never been told. And this is why they disassociate with who they are.
Right.
And so there's this big gap that I think we do see. I feel like that older generation that's coming out in their 40s and 50s. I think that is probably more of this evidence from the 80s and the 90s when you were doing these early shifts with, just shifting everybody to female.
Sure.
We weren't thinking about it. And that's why now they will tell you that these children, a lot of times they will say, wait, let the child decide. Yeah, and what they're doing is what the doctors are doing is letting this child figure out their gender identity so that you can match the organs to the gender identity. And that's what we mean by making sure that we're not just throwing somebody in a box because everybody said there's supposed to be just two boxes, and there aren't. Genetically, if you go speak to anybody who's a geneticist, they will tell you there are multiple. It's not XX and XY.
Yeah.
It's not. There are multiple chromosomal abnormalities, differences that vary, and they make us all beautifully unique.
And there always have been. So I even hesitate to use the word abnormality, and I'm not, saying
no, it's not. It's not. It's just a variation. It's a variation. We have it in nature.
Not every blue-eyed person has the same shade of blue eyes. If you think of a blonde right now in your head, and I think of a blonde in my head, we may be thinking about two very different hair colors. There's just variance. Our skin tones vary. All these things, even like penis sizes and shapes and colors and texture. I mean, vaginal shape, colors, all of those things vary and are different from one person to the next. Why wouldn't our experience within our own bodies, our gender expression, why wouldn't it be just as varied?
Right. And I wanted to bring in, we actually talked about, I think I mentioned it before on here. I know I mentioned it in Mama Bear. There's actually been some studies. We've actually come out with this now. There's a lot of neurology studies that are being done that actually, when they look at the brain of someone who's transgender, typically the part of the brain that creates your gender identity, if you're looking at a trans male, that part of the brain is masculine.
Yes.
If you look at a trans female, it is feminine. That part of the brain that develops their gender identity.
A cisgender person of that sex does. And I love that. I thought that was super fascinating.
That's brilliant to me, that we really are finally tapping into more of the science of it, so that people can't just say, oh, well, you just think that. No, we don't think that. We're actually proving that this is science, that this did happen.
Right.
And I think I mentioned this before, but we've actually also done some studies now that are relating the fact that women, when we get pregnant, or anybody who gets pregnant,
uterus,
anybody with a uterus, when they get pregnant, the hormones in their body, we're not necessarily checking what your hormone levels are when someone comes in and says they're pregnant. When they're pregnant, we're looking for HCG. That's all we're looking for. We're looking for elevated HCG. So you don't know what that person's baseline hormonal levels are. And what they are now finding is that people who identify as transgender or gender diverse, that oftentimes when they were being developed in development, that there was either, I think it usually is typically, I believe, a lowered amount of hormone. And because of that lowered amount of hormone, that is tied into later how their gender identity is built. And so they're actually identifying as something different. So again, we're seeing this correlation with science that links from pregnancy, from in the womb, their development, to when they come out.
And
so
that makes sense.
It's not made up.
As somebody who overproduces what we commonly consider male hormones, was that the case when I was pregnant with my son?
And see, I don't have polycystic ovarian syndrome.
I don't know.
See, I don't have polycystic ovarian syndrome, but I have polycystic ovaries.
Okay.
And so I have had those issues before, which may mean at certain times my hormone fluctuates. And if my hormone was fluctuated with my first pregnancy, nobody was looking for it.
Right.
That's not something it's not something we're looking for. And so I think, again, just because we're not looking for it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Right. And I think people want to say that we're trying to pull things out of thin air to make our children, I don't know, to like substantiate this trend that's going on, this fad. And that's not the truth of it. There have been trans people since the beginning of time.
Right. But we are trying to understand it better, because when you can understand things on a medical and scientific level, it makes it a little bit more difficult to discriminate against people.
Yes.
It's just like it
also makes it easier to support their care.
Of addiction and alcoholism. Why is that important? As a recovering alcoholic, I don't care why I have alcoholism. I don't care if it's genetic. It probably is. My mother's alcoholic. Her mother was alcoholic. I don't care if it's because my liver processes alcohol differently. None of that stuff matters to me, because I just have to deal with what is. But When we see it with the disease model, we open up more medical avenues to treat it, instead of treating people like they have some kind of moral failing, that they're bad people, that they just have no self-control. When we can start to see it that way, we're going to fund more rehab centers. We're going to come up with more medications that help people to get clean, stay clean. Those things are important. Those are life-saving things. So all it comes down to is whenever we're talking about those things and we want to understand it, it's because we want to make it less difficult. We want to make it harder to discriminate against people. And we also want to know that then policies can be in place to protect those people. So those people can go to the freaking doctor and get the care they need. And I don't just mean hormone therapy. Everybody thinks you mean hormone therapy when you talk about gender affirming care. I'm not always talking about that. I want my son to be able to go, if he needs to a gynecologist and be treated with respect and be treated like the man he is, with those parts, because those parts don't determine who he is. Any one of us at any moment can develop cancer in our parts, have those parts removed. I'm not any less of who I am because those parts are removed. You can be in an accident. You can just be born with, physical differences, for whatever reason that got skipped in utero developing. That doesn't make me less of who I am. My body parts do not define me. They do not define you. All of this science and all of these things that we're trying to understand better really are just to protect human autonomy.
Yes, exactly. And Cooper puts up here, wait a minute, how often were intersex babies in the 80s and 90s literally mutilated without their consent? Cooper, from our understanding, this pediatrician this was in med school. All pediatricians were being trained to, at least in that particular state, they were all being trained that if they showed up as intersex, to all change over to female.
Well, only if you could tell, like if they were born and, what was between their legs was different or malformed, or, sometimes they'd be like, oh my gosh, this,
or they have both
is malformed, or they have both. What do we do with it? When I was in college it had to have been 1998. We watched a whole documentary on it, and it was following the lives of intersex people in Europe. And that had been happening long before the 90s, because these were adults now. So that had to have been happening in the 60s and 70s.
Yep.
And so
I don't know how long. We just know that this particular person had been trained that way, Cooper. And they did school in like the late 80s and I believe early 90s. And so this is how we both knew that this happened. But I don't know how long that had been going on. And that may have been going on for 20 or 30 years.
If not longer.
Because everybody wants an easy answer. Right. And so like when parents, honestly, when a baby's born like that and everybody's like, oh, what do we do now? And it was like, well, we got to fix it. We got to fix it. Everybody wanted a quick fix. And they thought, okay, if we fix the organ so we don't have to deal with this later, this is never going to be an issue. And quite frankly, now you have a lot of adults who are really confused.
Yeah.
Because they do not identify with their organs, and they're trying to figure out for themselves why that doesn't align with them. And some of these people don't even know. And this is when they're finding out that this happened to them as children or as infants, because again, their doctors when they were born and their parents were kind of like, well, we can't do this. We got to fix this.
Yeah.
And now doctors are kind of more on the fence of, we're going to wait. We're going to wait and see what the child develops as. We're going to see how this child, what they decide to do with their gender, so that you don't have this, when they become adults, this massive disconnect with who they are. That's more supportive. It's more supportive to do it that way. It's more therapeutic to do it that way. Before, it was just an easy answer.
And the idea that you have to be intersex in order to have that autonomy is pretty messed up too. Just because all your things come out normal, regular, typical, common, whatever, does not mean that that's still who you are inside. No. And if we start looking at, let's do a hormone screen on every, pubescent child. Let's do a chromosomal analysis on every, kid. You're still missing the part that Amber talked about, which is it's in the brain. First of all, the brain controls everything.
Right.
I mean, every single hormone, every function is controlled inside the brain. So obviously it has to be taking care of the brain. Well, what are you going to try to do now? Cut people's brains open and change them, or electroshock them into, the gender? People be who they are, and the world will be a better place.
Yeah, I wish sometimes, like when people came out now, when I found out about the brain part about identifying, I was kind of like, can we just start doing that? Like if a kid comes in and says, hey, I think I'm trans, and the parents are being really like objectionable about it, or the state even, like get the doctor to go to a neurologist and do a brain scan. Oh, look here, male brain. Leave the kid alone.
Do that, and what if it isn't? What if that brain doesn't show? It still shouldn't matter. Who cares?
Right?
Who cares?
Just because you feel that way. Like I grew up very, 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 very conservative, very Christian. I don't identify that way either way now. Right. I'm not. But if you try to put me in that box, I'm going to be miserable.
Right.
I'm going to fight back against you. I'm not going to be easy to deal with. Why do we want to do that to children? Why do we want to force them to be something they aren't? Yeah. That is the disconnect that I have with parents who don't accept their kids, who want to force them to be something that they aren't. Is you would never want that for yourself. Why would you do that to your own child?
Right.
And I think in a way, through society, a parent should have kind of felt that, because we get a little easier, a little less restrictive as we go along. And so like I wasn't as restrictive as my mother and father were. And if my kids had kids, and right now none of my children want children, but if my children wanted to have kids, I would expect them to be less restrictive than I am, because they're again trying to, that was a bit too harsh. That was a bit too much. Let me back off of that.
Yeah.
So if we felt like our parents were too harsh, why are we going to then turn around and be harsher with our children? As a mom, that was a polar opposite of where I was.
Well, a lot of people
totally
don't know any, you only know what you know, right? And most
right.
of what you know is what you've lived. More than your
experience
education can give you is lived experience. And there are people who know things in the bottom of their heart that are absolutely false, but it's their perception of everything, and that becomes part of their identity. And so
right.
when you question that or you knock it off its rocker, I think people get to feeling like, well, then if that isn't true, and I've made that this integral part of my identity and who I am, then who am I? And that can be really scary. And, trying to convince somebody that, well, it's okay if who you thought you were, something you thought you knew isn't correct. You're still okay. You can still learn. You can still do it differently. I know that you and I have both done that through I've completely deconverted. I'm an atheist through and through. I know you're a little more spiritual. I think I'm more spiritual in like maybe in like this humanity way, but generally, no, I don't believe in anything supernatural at all. And so, I learned different, and there was that deconversion element where I was like, then who am I? What do I believe?
Right.
And I really struggled with, well, I have to believe in something. So I sought other religions and I sought other spiritual modalities, because I thought I have to have that. Like that's what people do. Right.
Right.
And it just took time to break that down and go, but maybe I don't really need that. Maybe I just have convinced myself or allowed myself to be convinced that I have to have that in order to feel peaceful, or in order to be a good person, or in order to be moral.
You've been convinced that. I mean, I feel like that's part of it. We've been convinced that that's something that we need, not necessarily that we need it. And I think that's like a individual determination. You figured that out for yourself. But I think a lot of times they teach us. Right. I think a lot of people are they want to teach you that you need that.
Right.
Just like we need to fit into a box. Yeah. We need to fit neatly into a male or female package so everybody's happy. So that the females automatically want to be pregnant and barefoot, and the males want to go to work and mow the yard. And that's not the way it works.
I gotta highlight this, because I love this, because I was thinking this when you said it.
Yes.
When you talked about that, we gotta fix these babies. There's a
Yes.
long question, and I know this is off topic, but my son is on the autism spectrum as well. I mean, I am an autism specialist. I had no idea until he was like 17 years old. And then once his doctor brought it up, I was like, oh my God, he has always done those things. Yes. But there is a big, when autism became more kind of in the limelight, because I don't want to say it became more prevalent. Autism has been around forever also. But when we were hearing more and more and more about it, then there was this back drive to, oh my God, don't vaccinate your kids, because what if they turn out autistic? I mean, ouch. I can't imagine anyone saying, don't do something because they might turn out like Jenny. Ouch, that hurts my soul to think about. That we, oh my God, well, what can we do to prevent autism, as if it's some kind of horrible thing? And that's where I worry about science coming in with trans rights. Is I worry that it'll become like eugenics, where it's like, well, how do we breed that out of people so that we don't have those people anymore? These aren't things to be fixed. These are just human beings. They're just people. And of course we want to prevent certain things because we don't want people to suffer. But the only reason that people who are transgender are suffering is because of us. It is not, they would be fine. And in fact, when they are allowed to live authentically, when they're supported and loved,
they thrive.
They thrive. It's not any different than a cisgender person. So this idea, I loved that, Cooper. I loved that, Amber. Just that idea of like, well, can we fix it? People don't need to be fixed. They need to be loved. They need to be cared for. They need to be supported. They need to be respected. Every single person. My alcoholism doesn't need to be fixed. It's just a part of me that I have to be mindful of, so that I don't go down a path that ruins my life and other people's lives. But there's no fixing it. It exists. I have it, and I have to learn how to treat it. Autism exists. People have it, and they learn how to deal with it. And we have to learn how to deal with it so that we can love and support and affirm and care for them. Not so we can make them better, not so that we can acclimate them to society better, just so that they can exist safely within our society.
Right. And like I had two children who were in the autism spectrum, my youngest two, and then the oldest, he's neurodivergent, ADD. And honestly, looking at it, he probably has some level of autism as well. I have several layers of neurodivergence that we didn't know until my mid-30s. And looking at my kids now, it's kind of like, duh, you should have known that. But we know it now. But it's not something that can be fixed. It's not something, honestly, what you're trying to do. And what I feel like, and I hear you on the science about worry that science is leaning into an area that we're going to try and fix that. And I think we're finally leaning into an area of just understanding how to support them.
I hope so. It always makes me a little nervous because as cool as it is for many of us, the other side will take it and use that as a reason to, do something different. Like, oh my God,
I think we always
sure that all pregnant mothers are high on their estrogen or high on this, because what if, holy crap, like, no, don't start we don't full of things because you're worried that their kid's going to come out a certain way.
Yeah, exactly. And I do think, but I think I'm hoping that more of it is just saying, these are why trans people exist. And these are why gender diverse. Yes, this is why gender diverse people exist, instead of going, this is a trend. This is a fad. And I think that's more where this medical research will guide us, is that way we can be supportive to these children. We can be supportive to the trans community, the gender diverse community, no matter what their needs are, whether you're talking about maternal health, which is a really nuanced field that we don't have a lot of professionals that have any clue how to help someone who has transitioned, who at the same time has the organs to be able to reproduce life and wants to reproduce life. And I think these are, the studies that they're doing now, I think are finally getting to the bottom of some of these questions so that we can support that community better. And like you said, to quiet the noise from the other side.
And I have to remind myself, the other side is going to take whatever they want and run with it anyway. They're going to do that regardless of how I feel or what we put in place or how perfectly we do it. So sometimes I have to remember to get that out of my head. I cannot control.
Well, we still want to help. We still want to help that narrative. You still want to hope that with conversation, we can get some of those on that other side to come back.
Yeah.
To at least examine it, to at least be open enough to go, wait a minute, let me listen to what they're saying. Let me look at the studies. Let me look at the evidence that's being put out. What are they truly saying? What is this really showing us? To make them question, because I think if you can make people curious, it opens the door to hopefully moving to acceptance and inclusion. That's the hope.
It's a beautiful thing.
It is.
And
I mean, when we're shut off, we don't want to know. We don't want to know. We don't want to examine. We don't want anybody giving us more information. We want to stay stuck. We want to stay in that mindset, whatever it is that we want. And so I think by keeping
it confirms something in ourselves, that confirmation bias.
Right.
That, I've known people who've changed their minds about things like, I don't want to say the word unaliving, self-unaliving, and things about, homosexuality. But I've known people who were deeply religious. Those things happened with other people in their lives. And all of a sudden it really made them go, then what else might I be hearing from my religious community that's wrong? And that is scary for people. That is very scary. Right. Because then they go, do I have to abandon the whole Bible? Do I have to abandon my whole faith? And, the answer, first of all, is no. No, you don't.
Right.
There are plenty of other things that come out and say, hey, these words may have been or were, mistranslated, or they were intentionally mistranslated often. And you don't have to reject that. You can accept that maybe every single thing that you've been taught isn't entirely accurate. That doesn't mean you have to quit loving your God or enjoying your religious community. But it does mean that you may have to choose between your child or someone you love and something that is in your life that might be harming them.
For me, the way I break it down is you can choose between a person or you can choose between a belief system. And for me, I'm going to choose the person over the belief system every single time.
Every time.
Especially when it comes to your kids. Like, no question. Like, it may take you a minute to get around that, because it took me a minute to get around some of mine. But when it came down to, am I going to believe what I thought or my kid? And my kid 100% every time.
Absolutely. I know we are close to wrap up. I do want to say that if anyone knows of parents that maybe are struggling with this, or, grandparents, other people, whatever, we'd love for you to, invite them to come join us, watch us, learn from us. I know Amber really works more directly with families, and I am not against anyone at any stage listening, learning, communicating. I'm all for respectful, I'm not going to listen to somebody who's just a troll or is here to be nasty or unkind, but I don't, I'm not going to throw shade or be ugly to somebody just because they're struggling with that, because people come to the table with a lot of things. And just because it was easy for me as a parent doesn't mean it's easy for everybody. And I understand, because we love our children more than anything. And the number one thing I think we experience whenever our kids come out as trans is fear of what in the world is going to happen to them. And for me, what are other people going to do? How are other people going to treat my kid? I wasn't worried about him. I wasn't worried about him changing his mind, because I figured, well, if he does, we'll walk through that together too. That's my job. But
to me, it was like driving. Putting them behind the wheel of the car. I can trust you all day long, but I don't trust other people.
I don't trust the other
around them. Right. And that is kind of like the best scenario when I talk about it as an example, is that, yes, like I wasn't worried about my kid. It was everybody else around that I had to worry about. I think as a parent, that's us anyway. But when you have a trans kid, it definitely sticks out a little bit more, way more. And I have not, we haven't really discussed a whole lot what we're doing next week. So I don't think we'll be doing it on Christmas Eve on Sunday night. And I don't think New Year's Eve either, but I plan to do the show. We just may do it a day or two earlier, and we'll put the announcement out there.
Yeah.
It'll be out there. Sorry. But yeah, we do still plan to have an episode. It just may be a couple of days earlier just to make it easier for everybody in the holidays.
I love that. I love that we got to sit here and chat about this tonight. Biological sex and gender are not the same thing.
No.
You know, body parts and hormones and chromosomes can vary. It's just different, but it has nothing to do with, you know, what color you like to wear, or whether you want to wear dresses, or whether you want to wear your hair short, or whether you want a flat chest.
Right.
But it matters to that individual, because when you know who you are and your body looks different than you feel like it should. When I had little chin hairs, I didn't like it because it just didn't make me feel like how I wanted to feel myself. That's okay. That is just other examples of expression and identity, and they are all fine. That's still the same human being deep down. They still deserve love, respect, affirmation, and goodness. And that's all we're going to try to do.
That's all we want. Love, inclusion, acceptance, the normal.
All people have something to teach us about ourselves.
Yes. And our kids can teach us a whole heck of a lot. I think they've been my greatest teachers. My greatest teachers have been my kids. All right. With that, guys. Right? Okay. So let's do our new, a revamp. Y'all are going to notice a different outro. I revamped the outro. But so we're going to catch y'all next week. Like I said, keep a lookout. I'll send out invites. I'll send out a notice. But we will be doing next week's episode. And it will be on holidays and how you support your trans kids around the holidays, around going into whether it be community functions, your work functions, your family functions. We're going to get into all the details.
All right.
And with that, bye guys.